General Secretary of the Western Province, COSATU, the National Labor Union for the Western Province, but he's been an advocate of the labor union movement for some time, both in South Africa and internationally. And he's quite a comrade. And I want to say from a feminist perspective that I so much appreciate Tony because he walks the line of being a comrade in the labor union movement and in the women's movement. And much of the work that we've been able to do with the South African Domestic Service and Allied Workers Union comes through Tony's understanding of women's labor and the informal economy and the very distinct role of domestic labor in this economy in South Africa. And so, Comrade Tony, I say thank you for that on behalf of women here and in the United States and South Africa. Thank you. You know Hester Stevens from books and readings and stories because Hester and Myrtle are a bit famous now in the U.S. And so you're going to hear from Hester later. And she is a full-time domestic worker. She's also been with the union movement for over 30 years, and she works actively in her life while she's working with her everyday full-time job. She's also advocating for women's rights as the vice president of this national union. And then Myrtle Vitboy has over 40 years experience in the labor union movement, and she's here every day of her life, and she's seen SATSAWU through many forms, and she maintains that commitment, particularly in this new era of South Africa. And we have an incredible respect for you two women, and we're so happy to hear from you again on this side of the Atlantic. And we just want to say thank you, and Tony, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Well, thanks very much. It is always an incredible honor and a privilege to have the opportunity to talk to you. And today when I welcome you to South Africa, I can say that I'm genuinely sincere about that. Because before I thought, here's these wonderful Americans that are coming here, but they always vote for this nutter as a president. And I know that there may be some Republicans amongst you, and it's not my intention to offend you, but you know across the world people look towards you. And always when we do speak as South Africans, we talk from the vantage point of having also one of the most respected global citizens in Nelson Mandela. But I think clearly for the new era, for the time and the challenges to come, your country is both an inspiration and will have to continue being a shining light that shows the way into the future. In the short time of the Obama administration, we've been really encouraged, and there's been a number of positive steps that have taken place. And I think more than anything else, it both shapes our ideas about what it is that we need to be doing here, but we think it builds on the kind of values, the kind of leadership that somebody like Nelson Mandela had brought to the global stage. So it is a special honor and a privilege for me to invite you as Americans, both to tell you about what's happening in our country, but to try and build some sense of fellowship across a world that is not going to be able to undo the incredible difficulties that exist if we don't build partnerships, if we don't internationalize or globalize the sense of solidarity that exists between different peoples. But we've also got to find a way to make sure that this notion of social justice has a lot more resonance within the society. In days gone by, people felt proud to be part of a movement that fought for the right things in life. But of late, we've lost our way, not only in our own country or in yours, but I think across the globe, where the power of multinational corporations, the greed that drives the philosophy of big businesses, and the aspirations of our people has distracted them from the obligations and the desire to build a better world. So children these days are much more desirous of Nikes and Levi's than about finding out how do they do the best thing in the world. And anyone who wants to be a social activist has got to make sure that the discussions that they're engaged in is both about reaffirming those values, but also finding a way in which to mainstream them again, in which to make the notion of a decent human being popular and being the hegemonic value across the world. So I hope that our discussion in some way contributes to building that sense of solidarity across the globe, because that's an essential part of how we're going to be able to go forward. My own sense is that in any discussion that takes place, there are always pegs in the ground that guides us. And especially now when we look at what has been the statements that underpin both the election campaign of Obama, but also that message that has resonated across the world. That firstly, of course, his slogan, which is much more popular than ours even in South Africa, is "Yes, we can." And it just engenders such a sense amongst people that ordinary people need to do it. We need leaders who exemplify our values and take forward what it is that we hope for ourselves we'd be taking forward in the world. But much more than that, we need people to be active participants in shaping a new agenda. And so when Obama talks about the fact that we can't dismiss the market, and we're not for a moment suggesting that, the market has an incredibly important role to play across the world. It has shown its ability to generate wealth in unprecedented levels. But what it's shown us more than anything else is that it hasn't had the ability to make sure that it redistributes the benefit of that growth. That prosperity is not extended into every corner of our country or every corner of the world. And that's really got to be the challenge. We've got to find the way in which we relate to each other across the globe around a set of rules that puts people as the main deciding factor of what needs to be done. But any journey to getting us to the point about how do we decide to take those things forward has to start off about where we find ourselves. How have we given an expression to our sense of common humanity, and how have we been able to take that forward? And I think in our own country, and you know a bit about the legacy of apartheid, which was an international abomination, and many, many comrades and friends across the world had made incredible efforts to make sure that we could overcome our difficulties here. We certainly appreciate that. But if anything, that must challenge us to do more for other countries in the spirit of global solidarity. And sometimes we don't do enough. We let geopolitical and other leadership considerations undermine the fact that we should just be doing the right thing. It's not a complicated thing. It's not a science. That's what's more humane, what's more just. And so we feel a bit sad that on our own borders, we haven't necessarily done the right thing for the people of Zimbabwe. And in Myanmar, our country continues to let them operate an embassy here in spite of the atrocities that's being perpetrated there. But that's part of the ongoing battle, and we've got to continue raising our voices across the globe to make sure that those questions are challenged. But for us, that's important because that's what brought us to the point that we were. Because apartheid was much more about just the dislike or the manufactured dislike of black people to white people or white people to black people. It was a systemic way in which there was an attempt to marginalize certain sectors of the society and preference the others in pursuit of a very cold and calculated agenda. But ultimately, people, black and white, were the pawns of a bigger battle. A battle around colonialism, a battle around imperialism, and a battle for the resources of our country and how people could control it. And it tore apart the soul of our people and their ability to unite to advance that battles. And so what we must now do is find a way to restore that sense of fragmentation within our communities, to bring people together, because it's out of that sense of togetherness that we can only build a community. Your own country has its difficulties also, its own history of many things that have happened that we are not proud of. But it's that common history that I think must challenge us even more to be on the right side of history, to make sure that we challenge always what the issues are that should be done. So in South Africa, the battle against apartheid, the emergence of incredible leaders, people of vision and values that inspired our people to both overcome an incredible hardship, but also do it in a way that set the tone for our future engagement. But in spite of 1994, and 1994 was a watershed moment in our country, because really what happened at that point was that we had the first elections, and elections that's meant to say that we're going to realize the vision that people had struggled for.